speaker today is one of our own members, who many of us know because she's very active in several aspects of the church. She has been a member of Westside for nearly 10 years and is a lifelong UU. She loves quilting in all its forms and has made some of the hangings you see here and there around the church. She dreams of being a noted textile artist, a singer, a dancer, but not being young again. We welcome Debby Rake this morning as our speaker and are excited to hear what she has to say.
Thank you. My reflection this morning is an expansion on a shorter statement I offered when I participated in the AIM service back in April. I'm getting old. For quite a while, I've been saying, I'm getting older. It sounds less definite somehow. But the truth is, I'm getting old. I'm very fortunate to be as healthy and fit as I am, and I work at that every day. I also thank my ancestors for providing me with some pretty good genes. There are some wonderful things about getting old. I have more patience. Of course, I started from near zero, so I've had lots of room to improve on that. I have more empathy. I feel like I'm becoming more open to differences. I can see that many paths flow in basically the same direction. I have lots of experience to compare to and reflect on. But I'm getting old. I remember the columnist Irma Bombeck, back in the 80s, I think, telling a story about putting her coat on and noticing her mother's hands emerging from the sleeves. Getting old creeps up on me, and then it amazes me. How did it happen? After all, I'm still somewhere in my 30s inside. But my body is changing in ways that are obvious to anyone, and I'm not entirely thrilled about that. It's harder to remember names. My retrieval system of facts and terms gets stuck sometimes. There aren't very many things that I used to be able to do and can no longer, but there are some. There will be more. That's the thing about getting old. I know that some losses are inevitable and permanent. There's no way of knowing what they will be, but they will happen. I know that there will come a time when I need some help to do things I used to do for myself. I will have to deal with this as best I can. It happens to everybody. What we don't talk about, those of us who are getting old, is that sometimes we feel really afraid about what is going to happen. My mother watched her mother slide into senility and lived for the last 35 years of her life terrified that the same thing would happen to her. It never did. She died at 90, still perfectly cogent and aware, still interested in the world and what was happening, still eager to talk about what she learned and thought about with anyone who cared to join her, still angry at injustice and malice and willful blindness. But at 75, her hearing began to go, and at 82, her sight. And by the time she was 85, she was nearly blind and nearly deaf. Two disabilities that isolated her, wrapped her in cottony fog, and made it nearly impossible to make the kinds of contributions to the world that had defined her to herself, or to enjoy the company of others and be reasonably confident they could enjoy hers. Her experience fills me with dread. My contemporaries don't speak about this much, but occasionally, in a joke or an aside, or an offhand comment, I can recognize a fear similar to mine. I am afraid, as I age, of being stranded in isolation. I am afraid of not being able to contribute to or even participate in the community that I love and depend on. You use covenant to form a loving community. For many of us, it is of utmost value. It provides a foundation, a place where we fit and know we are valued, a home. I am most afraid that when I become infirm, I will lose my access to this community. I'll lose my place. One of my friends, Denny Cornett, who is an art quilter, told me that she was most afraid of running out of time before she reaches her potential. She just cooks with ideas for new ways to make her art and loves to try something new. She doesn't want to have to stop. When I got this far in writing my reflection, I realized that all I had done was to describe a problem. And the first thing that came into my head when I started thinking about aging was fear. Why? Why would this dominate my thinking to such an extent? More importantly for me, what do I do now to get myself off of this ledge of fear that I am perched on? I'm on it, I think, partly because of my personal experience and partly because of the world I grew up in and live in. I am coming to realize that I was infected with my mother's fear. She started talking about aging and dying soon after my dad died, when she was in her early 50s. It got worse as her own mother grew older. Grandma Edna died just short of her 100th birthday. She was a strong-minded, eccentric, highly opinionated person. Sound familiar? Who was hard to reason with even before dementia stole her away. Watching her long, slow decline was the worst thing that could have happened to my mother and caused her untold pain. Mom became, I don't know if obsessed is the right word, but that does describe it, with infirmity, with death, and with the process of dying. What she wanted, what she was afraid would happen to her, what my brother and I should do for her and not do. Over and over, until I finally started saying, Mom, I get it. I understand how you feel and I will do what you want. Now, can we please move on? But she couldn't. She had to talk about it, and she needed me to listen. The other source of my fear might stem from the image of aging that seems to be everywhere. It is not positive. Sir Ridwan Dovey, in an article in the New Yorker magazine titled, "What Old Age is Really Like," which she wrote when she was 23, describes two stereotypes that she sees over and over again in fiction. The frail dodderer, often male, and the zany eccentric, often female. This woman, who has cast off her sensible inhibitions, is described in Jenny Joseph's poem, Warning. You know the one. When I am old, I shall wear purple with a red hat that doesn't go. Ms. Joseph's aside, most of the stereotypes we see are totally focused on loss. Loss of intellect, loss of physical vigor, and nothing else. Nothing about what might have been gained with the years. Other societies value people of great age. We tend not to. One of the characteristics of the post-industrial society we live in is that we tend to define ourselves by what we do, and particularly by what we do to earn a living. We all want a comma after our names. You know, Jane Smith, comma, librarian. John Jones, comma, engineer. My husband and I earned our living together. He's a CPA, so he had a comma. I never felt like I had one of my own, even though I knew I contributed my share to our business. I went back to school in my late 50s, partly so I could have one. Debby Rake, comma, quilt historian. Even after retirement, we can continue to define ourselves this way or allow others to do so. We are not encouraged by the ethos we live in to define ourselves and value ourselves by other criteria. So how do I get better? How do I fix my mindset? First, I acknowledge that what I feel is real. The Buddhist teacher, Pema Chodron, says that no one can escape fear, but it can be transcended. First, you must name the fear and know it. Then you can ask yourself, what keeps me from being happy with who I am? So I face it. I'm getting older, and there will be losses. Then I change my focus. I am loved, and I have love to give. I have skills, and I can share them. I'm strong and pretty healthy, and have the resources to keep on keeping on in that area. I talked to a number of my women friends while I was working on this reflection. I am fortunate in having a circle of amazing women in my life. By the way, they all gave me permission to share their stories. Joy Downs even sent me one of her poems. It is titled, "Resisting Those Expensive Miracle Creams." There's a reason for the lines and the wrinkles. They remind us of our limited time, that our turn upon the earth in this form will end. They whisper to us in the mirror, "Are you there yet? Have you done what you might? Hurry now, before your light dims, while there is still ample glow and shadow to play with." Another friend, Bobby O'Brien, reminded me that we all leave a legacy for others. Legacies get passed on from generation to generation. I learned about friendship and what it means from my mother. I learned that my friends can become the family I create, because that is what hers were to her. My dad died when she was 53. The next day, her circle of friends were all at the house, and one of them ribbed her because she was wearing red socks. Not the usual widow's weeds, her friend teased. None of us had expected to laugh that day. A few years later, Mom had to have surgery, and they took turns staying with her at the hospital to make sure she was okay. I named them the Barbara Smith Benevolent and Protective Association. Mom asked me to wait to come and stay with her until later when she was home again, because she had them. I consider this to be her greatest legacy to me, the gift of recognizing the value of friends and cherishing them. Personal legacies are most often not about fabulous treasures or world-renowned accomplishments. They are the small, everyday events and objects that enrich us, usually in small ways. They are habits and attitudes and caring and skills. I can consider my own legacy. I'm creating it now. I've been creating it for many, many years. The first thing that comes to mind is my family. I suppose that's true for nearly everyone. I have 2 sons and 2 granddaughters. My sons are good men and wonderful fathers. They are as involved with their children as any fathers could be, and have been since their kids were born. For my second son, Joe, especially, this has been a conscious decision on his part. It is not easy raising a child with a severe handicap. Sophia needs care 24/7 and will always do so. Too many fathers find that the burden is too heavy and walk away from it. Where did he learn to stay? Where did he learn to be so loving and so committed? Maybe, partly, from me? If so, that's a part of my legacy that I am proud of. Another sort of legacy is the things we make. I'm not thinking of heirlooms or precious objects, but the everyday stuff that we share with others. We all leave something of this kind. Cakes, flowers, sparkling clean bathrooms, bicycles repaired, Cub Scout go-karts. These things, however ephemeral, remain intact and meaningful in memory. For me, pumpkin pies made every Thanksgiving for nearly 50 years. And quilts. I love making quilts, and I've made well over 100 of them, but I have very few. I've given almost all of them away. Quilts by their nature don't last. They are meant to be used and used up. Baby quilts, for example, get loved and washed to death, most of them. But people remember that they had them. Particularly, they remember that something was made especially for them. Passing on the skills and knowledge of how to make things is another part of a legacy. I've taught sewing and quilting skills many times. Here at Westside, I taught Chloe Finn, when she was 9, to sew on the same sewing machine as my mother taught me on when I was 9. That was fun. I recently taught my daughter-in-law to make pumpkin pie from scratch. She was born and raised in tropical Acapulco. Homes there often don't even have ovens. Baking is not part of most homemakers' skill set. It gives me great pleasure to know that my son is assured of a steady supply of pumpkin pies for a good long time. As my friend Joy says, the only day we know we have is this one. If we're alive, more things are going right with our bodies than are going wrong. If we have love in our life, in any one of its many forms, why should we choose to picture a future without love? We always have a choice about letting fear drive our bus or making fear take a seat way in the back. Writing this reflection has helped me see things more clearly. Sometimes it's easier to think through a problem if you can just line up the various issues and viewpoints, slap labels on them, and give them a good, thorough looking over. Having done this, I can make a decision. I can decide if I will allow my mother's fears and society's narrow categories influence me, or whether I will choose to live as much as I can focused on the present. Isn't it interesting that the word present has 2 entirely different meanings? The present is now, and it is also a gift. Please rise in body or spirit and join me in singing